Hello and welcome to the Cyber Show. My name is Pip Blake. I'm the Managing Director of Disruptive Cyber Group. And today I'm here with Chris from Cado Security. Chris, hello. Thank you for joining me. Will you start by just giving us a quick introduction to yourself and the organisation that you work with?
Sure. So my name is Chris Doman. I started the company called Cado Security about 4 years ago now. So not all that long. We're based out of the UK. Actually, the office is across the road from where we're filming today, so that's pretty close.
Very handy.
Yes, it's very easy to get here, which is good. And then what we do at a high level is cloud forensics and incident response. So people get hacked in the cloud. We have some software to help them out.
Okay, that's interesting. So obviously we're a couple of shows in. So I know that one of the biggest skills gaps that IRC2 were reporting from the first show was that cloud was, for obvious reasons. I know some were saying it's been accelerated by COVID and other side of things, that cloud exposure to the cloud threats is sort of one of the biggest concerns at the moment. So is that something that you're seeing within your organisation and what you're dealing with, the incidents you're dealing with?
Yeah, I guess we can kind of see it from two sides. So one is that our customers are coming to us because they're migrating to the cloud quite fast, particularly when we started at the beginning of COVID, and that was a really big trend going on there. But also as a company as well, we have to find engineers and cybersecurity experts with cloud skills. So that's kind of helps us, but also is a challenge for us as well.
So you're 4 years old now, and if anyone who decides to add Chris after this, please congratulate him. The 4-year party was a few weeks ago, so congratulations on that anniversary, and long may it continue. But if most organisations that they sort of start up because they find that there is a demand for these sorts of activities or these sorts of services that you provide. What sort of drove that? Was that you were seeing lots of exposure and sort of the need to respond to these incidents, or what was the sort of initial purpose of the founding the organisation?
Yeah, I mean, the background to James, the CEO, and myself is that we've been working for about 10, 15 years in incident response. So people get hacked, and we went in, we'd actually fly in physically and help them out. Quite a challenging job. And then more and more of those big incidents we're dealing with, we're in the cloud. And that's part of that bigger trend where more and more data is moving to the cloud, either because people are moving their existing operations there, or maybe they're a new tech company and they just started there. But either way, that's where the data is, that's where the attacks are, and that's why we've followed them now with not just services, but also software to help them out.
Are you still having to do as much travel as you were? I know you've got quite an international clientele, but as the founder, are you still sort of finding that you're getting a lot of client face time all over the place?
Yeah, I guess for different reasons though. Less so now actually going and helping someone mid-instant. It's meeting customers, particularly in the US. We have lots of US customers. That's where there's obviously pretty large market out there. But it's more for conferences, that kind of stuff, than someone's ringed us up and said we have to be there the next day.
No, the reason I ask is that a friend of mine is he's sort of incident response director for one of the large the Big Four, and he was in Frankfurt Airport 9 times in 14 days, so he's a bit fed up with that. So I just thought if you're on the same sleep schedule, I'll you may have to sort of cut this short. But I know we were just discussing about the US before this. Couple of questions. So how is it? Are you seeing the sort of instant or the US market's appetite for your services? How does it compare to the UK? And are you seeing a different sort of appetite as well? Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We follow one of the traditional start models where we sold to the US pretty much straight away. We identified that's where probably most of the market was going to be. And we ended up coming back to the UK a bit more as that's kind of, I guess, matured. That fits with the customer base, so pretty heavy in regulated industries like finance, healthcare, where there's incoming regulations, particularly the last year, saying you have to do investigations. So because of these rules and things like the SEC and the EU with some other stuff as well, we're seeing more and more kind of an uptick of that. But it was the US and now kind of coming back home again as well, which is kind of nice.
So there's quite a heavy compliance theme for anyone who's listening for the third episode at home. Obviously, I think from John on the first show was mentioning about NIST 2, about DORA, about NIST, and then I had Amelia on the previous show sort of talking about CAF because she focuses on mainly the critical national infrastructure side of things. So how much of your business to a certain extent is being driven by compliance, by these new regulations which are coming in?
More and more. So, I mean, early on, we're selling to basically the techies that love forensics and wanted to kind of bring them into their organization, which, as a techie myself, I really like because they have different kind of questions and things I want for the product. But now, as we're scaling to a larger organization and basically just selling more for more money, it's increasingly driven by regulation. So things like NIST and DORA are definitely helping us. But we're only one piece of the pie, though, because we're very focused on after everything hits the fan, whereas those regulations cover everything kind of in advance.
Okay. And with that, and I know we were, again, touched on the likes of the RSA conference, and I know why do you think that the US market is so much more mature than that of the UK?
I mean, one thing is obviously larger population. Each state is like a country in itself, which can cause other problems when you're selling to individual states. Also, they often lead the way with regulation too. So that, although to be fair, the UK is actually pretty good. They do early on regulation as well. But I think it's just lots of regulation and there's massive companies out there.
And so, I actually just had the other day, so I've got my admin account for various Google Google admin accounts. Sort of just the message just picks up, make sure that you're, here's a checklist of the various items that you should be making sure are secure. So the dynamic of those sorts of platforms, we know that a lot of, I can't quite remember the statistic, I'm sure you probably do, in terms of that there's multi-cloud platforms for a lot of organizations. How they're changing on a regular basis. I come from a training and certification background. I remember trying to update the labs when those different organizations are sort of changing their environment so dynamically. Trying to create labs for those particular vendor neutral courses was just an absolute nightmare to sort of maintain that. So in terms of how those platforms are changing, how is that influencing how you respond to particular incidents?
It kind of helps us in a way because that's what people pay us for, because we have a team of people. And then anytime Amazon Web Services updates the APIs to get that forensic data in a different way, then the team has to go and we see the tests maybe change, we go and fix that as quick as we can or support a new technology. So for us overall, it's helpful, but it's a challenge that we have to solve. Then the kind of wider piece too of how do you investigate and respond to all those different kind of environments, that's tricky as well, because if you're looking at a SaaS application like Google, like you're saying there, Google Workspace, Gmail, etc., that can look quite different to investigating an Amazon Web Services or a Google Cloud Platform, which is a physical system kind of sitting somewhere, or versus on-prem, the old way, where you'd be pulling copies of disks literally out of the machines and investigating those. So it's an interesting problem too, because you have to kind of marry all those different ways of responding to incidents.
Yeah. Because I think for years there were, and obviously because demand has risen, as you've part of the reason that you formed the business in the first place, but for those sorts of cloud services, do you still think, in terms of the argument that on-prem solutions are safer for large organisations? I know even governments have put various tenders out there for these massive migrations of government systems. Is there still a bit of a stigma around cloud deployment, or is it starting to change because of organisations like yours who are able to? I know obviously you're coming in from an incident response perspective, but because there are more organisations and individuals geared up to be able to sort of make those transitions.
Yeah, I mean, again, it actually varies a lot on the geographies, what I've seen so far. So in the US, we do some work with government. We don't know all the details there, but they have AWS GovCloud and all the other equivalent ones too. And they've been using that for a long time, just because sometimes they just scale up large amounts of systems very quickly, and the whole cloud argument basically. Yeah. Europe, I think, is taking a little bit longer, and there's some regulations in some of the European countries saying data has to stay on-prem, whereas the US hasn't quite got that in the same way. So I guess the summary is that things are moving that way, but at different paces. To the original question though, is data more secure on-prem? I think the honest answer is that it depends, because it depends on what data it is, how you're accessing that data. And there's no simple answer like the cloud is definitely 100% secure. That's not true. Nor is on-prem either. You just have different problems.
Yeah. And I think there's various quotes about casing a data center in lead and sinking it to the bottom of the sea, and it still won't be secure, right? So I understand that. And with that sort of European piece, and obviously with the US, and the regulation in the US being such a massive market and maybe slightly more mature than we are in the UK and the European regions as well. Europe is obviously several countries made up into sort of this melting pot where there is sort of a European jurisdiction that sort of overlays that. How is sort of what's the appetite for business in Europe across? Are there any particular countries that you see more demand for your services in, or is it sort of just with UK and US at the moment?
I mean, so far it's mostly UK and US in terms of Europe plus there, but also we do have some business in Asia, and that's kind of growing a bit. Some of the kind of more modern countries out there, and Australia as well. The way that we built the product is that it deploys into customers' cloud environments rather than ours. That does help in some countries like Germany, where we wouldn't be allowed to host their data, so they can host it in their own German AWS environment, for example. So you kind of have to be a bit flexible and offer different kind of ways of deploying software in different countries.
Okay. And what's the sort of roadmap for your team, for your product with emerging threats? Now, I made sure that I didn't say it first on the last two episodes. Again, I know that your CEO was at RSA as well, where everything was around artificial intelligence, machine learning, insert sort of emerging technology here. So what does that roadmap look like for you? How does the security for your services to your clients look, sort of moving into sort of with the emerging threat actors?
Yeah, I'm proud I didn't say AI first either, actually.
It was about time I did. So it's with the poor John and Amelia, I sort of sat here very quietly hoping that someone would say it before, and John's a big AI head. So, it was definitely my turn. But how does that look for your?
In some ways, it's always been part of the long-term vision before the latest AI boom. So what we're doing is automating some quite manual forensic response processes, because they've always been very, very manual. And the first step of that is just automating connections of APIs, getting the data without you having to go and click a million things. That's the kind of the first level. But we've always been building up to there is more automated reporting. Yeah. So actually being able to say, this is what happened, this is how the attackers got in, this is what they took. And we've been doing that now for since the start of the company, but it's got better and better. We do have a local LLM, which helps to generate some of that content, but it's only about 10% of the picture, to be honest. It's more traditional data science and machine learning kind of approaches, which we're finding for what we do, which is basically telling a story of what an attacker did, kind of building that all up together. And then one way you represent that is through text.
Do you think that there will be, in terms of, do you think an element that will be automated as sort of you move forward, as you sort of adopt new technologies? I know there's anything that could be used for good, could be used for bad, and will sort of start the manual grunt work, so to speak, be automated by the adoption of those tools and techniques?
Yeah, I mean, really seeing it. I mean, even before LLMs, more and more of cybersecurity was being automated, but also there were more and more complicated attacks, so maybe that was kind of averaging it out. But definitely the kind of stuff that even the cloud native vendors, so the AWS, the Microsofts, are just building out the box, so you almost get for free. Those things are giving more context to kind of what's happened in environments or what might happen in an environment. So that is helping. Attackers are using some of these new techniques, but also that hasn't made a massive impact either. It's kind of the traditional phishing emails are getting better, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
and obviously we're in sort of you guys sort of at the coalface of responding to those incidents have you seen a bit of an uptick in terms of the increased geopolitical tensions? I don't think we can ignore them. There's lots of news about them across, depending wherever you are in the world. Has that greatly impacted the flow of business for you? Are you seeing more nation-state actors coming after some of your clients, or you're responding on the behalf of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, we are responding to some of those attacks for clients. It's an interesting mix. In the cloud, a higher proportion of the attacks are opportunistic because it's basically massive data centers. So we see a lot of kind of boring in terms of the outcome, but interesting techniques attacks where people are Bitcoin mining on servers they hack into, or they're emailing people some code to run, which actually starts a new server. They pretend to be AWS and Microsoft and say, run this new server and do that kind of thing. But in terms of the wider geopolitics, yes, but that's also been happening the last few years too. So if you go back to some of the attacks which targeted Ukraine, which accidentally spilt over and then took out wider parts of the world's ecosystem. I mean, people are waiting on that kind of next attack as well, and there have been kind of mid-sized ones.
Yeah. So in terms of sort of how that sort of looks with regards the, I suppose it's almost a yes that there has been an uptick dramatically for your services with regards to that, but with the geopolitical situation as it is, what's the sort of future for your clients in terms of how they can potentially make themselves more resilient against these against the sort of attacks and sort of the threats which are out there? Obviously, you guys have visibility of you're putting in a lot of work to sort of unpick how did they get it? Oh, okay, this is how they particularly did it. What is it that you see is sort of almost a free advice if you can't give it because it's sort of that's what you're paid to do, don't give it. But I'm sure out of this someone may want to come knocking on your door and say, okay, we need your help. But what is the what would your advice be for organisations who are looking to secure their cloud? Sort of what you're seeing at the coalface in terms of those threats. I probably haven't described that particularly well, but hopefully you know what I mean.
No, totally get it. I'm happy to provide free advice. I hope that's why I'm here. I mean, a lot of it actually is pretty simple stuff, but people don't realize straight away. So in all the cloud providers, most of the logs are turned off by default because it will charge you and then money to turn them on. So it's really just going through and enabling all the logs so you can work out if there's a problem or not, because without them, you obviously can't detect if there's a problem. But also if there is a problem, you can then go back in time with that logging and then find out, how did they get in? Did they move to other systems? Did they take credit card or, secret files or whatever? So turning that on is important. Another piece there is getting access to that data as well. So a common tricky thing in the cloud is actually access to data can be very, very complicated. It basically means that your security team has to have a break glass kind of option to go in and say, get a full copy of a system to work out what happened, or be able to turn off a system. And the companies that have that set up in advance in the really bad attacks that we've seen, they're in a much better place than the ones where they had to fill out a JIRA ticket for a team, their cloud team, the other side of the world, to go turn that server off 48 hours later, and then 3 weeks later get a copy of it to work out what happens. But if you have the logging turned on, the security set up in advance, like the security access in advance, you're in a pretty good place. And then beyond that, it's all the kind of standard stuff around making sure that you have detections enabled on all that kind of stuff.
So everyone, turn your logs on if you haven't already, and if you need any help, make sure you come and ask for Cado Security services.
Thank you.
And in terms of, it looks like I'm going to be probably coming for some of that advice. And with regards to the sort of future of just cyber resilience as an entirety, I know we've sort of touched on sort of what the threat actors look like, sort of where it looks like for Cado Security. We know that there's a huge demand for cloud practitioners sort of moving forward, especially from by the sounds of it. But do you have any sort of predictions, or we won't hold you to them? That's fine. If we can always come back and edit if there's too grand a prediction. But in terms of sort of what you see for the direction in the next sort of 2, 3, 5, 10 years for the industry.
Yeah, I guess wider industry. It's kind of a boring one. Is that ransomware will continue to be the worst problem. It was underreported for a while because it wasn't as sexy as the big nation state attacks, although there can be some links there. But the impact across just the entire industries, charities we're talking about before we started filming as well, and just the wider kind of world, it's just insane. And the amount of money that's going into that means they're going to keep continuing to invest on their end in better vulnerabilities, better ransomware. So that's going to be the worst thing for the next at least 3 years, no matter what countries do around banning payments and etc. One piece of good news, though, on the other side is that I think cloud security is going to get better. For one thing, because the cloud providers themselves are enabling better defaults. So if you go and deploy a fresh AWS or Google account today, it won't have as many built-in vulnerabilities as it used to be. You won't be able to go and download all the data from a storage bucket as you could in the old days. You won't be able to go and authenticate to a random system without any kind of authentication, which kind of could happen previously, do some pretty crazy stuff. So I think cloud security will get better, but also the problems there won't go away either.
And with, I know, we had that conversation about charities beforehand, and sort of coming back to that, so obviously there's a huge disparity of cyber budgets around, from your from sort of your SMEs all the way up to sort of your large organisations. Maybe you'll obviously comment on sort of or where you can of the sorts of organisations, the size of organisations that you do work for. But in that respect, there's obviously if you've got sort of a large war chest that you can sort of spend a little bit of money on it. Are you seeing, do you think there's going to be sort of a uniform approach to this? Everyone, obviously there's compliance and regulations in place that to try and drive that. But in terms of are we going to be very much led by those organisations who have that budget, or are there things that we can sort of do from advise organisations to do it for who are that small or medium-sized size to be able to sort of mitigate those risks?
Yeah, I mean, I deal with organisations that have their own forensics and response team normally, and they're well above the cybersecurity poverty line, as people call it. It's not a very nice phrase, I guess, but it's good to draw attention to, because only maybe 1% of organisations actually have their own in-house team designed to respond to incidents and then learn from them. And if they don't, then either they go to someone else, they have to call in, or they rely on the government if they're important enough, or they're just left to fend for themselves. So it's tricky, I mean, because to be able to scale that kind of help to everyone is very, very hard. It's great there are organisations which are doing that. It's also good to see the UK's NCSC now releasing free tools, like free advice and tools, I think leading the way there. I think I've rambled and haven't really answered your question, but yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah. Nice. I know, I've seen sort of a lot of the tools the NCSC have released. Obviously, we're sort of just after Cyber UK as well, in terms of a lot of advice. I know that was live streamed in terms of the quality of talks which came out of that is enormous. I know we seem to have been at all the conferences over the last few weeks, but we always like to give the opportunity to our guests to say what they would like to the audience. So obviously you've got UK and US based customers, and as far as Australia and other emerging markets as well. Is there anything you'd like to say to that audience?
I mean, well, first off, thanks for listening. If you're here, that's fantastic. So I hope it was kind of interesting. Really enjoyed the conversation, talking through responding to incidents in the cloud, the wider, I guess, kind of skills gap in the rest of the industry too. If you'd like to talk to Cado Security, please reach out.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for coming in and enjoy that extremely perilous commute just over the road. But everyone, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for listening. This is the Cyber Show. I've been Pip Blake, and you guys have been beautiful. Thanks very much for listening.